Is this a good place? Because it's kind of noisy.
I can go to the seminar. I'd like to ask you, as you know about the Kashmir conflict, what kind of ways do you think the conflict can resolve?
I cannot say that I'm really an expert on that conflict. Of course, people are familiar with it, and it's been a conflict that has been going on for decades. It's difficult in those kind of circumstances because you have to really understand the historical claims. You could compare to like the issue of Dokdo between Korea and Japan. Of course, if you look at it from the Korean side, they say, of course, it should be ours, right? But the Japanese, they think they have some reason why it should be theirs, right? So you would have to really study the historical context and say, what are the original claims of Pakistan, respectively, and India on this territory? Who did it originally belong to, or was it halfway divided? Partly belonged to Pakistan, partly belonged to India. In this case, what also complicates the issue is the religious background, because of course the dividing line between Pakistan and India is faith, is religion. The Pakistanis essentially are Muslim, and the the Indians are Hindu. So you would also have to look at the population and see, is this a population that is predominantly part of the one religion or the other religion, and maybe based on that also it would have to be considered what is more likely who it could belong to. Perhaps it would be possible to divide the territory depending on religious affiliation. So those are some of the questions I think that would have to be addressed.
So going on more specifically, the Kashmir is divided into three parts. 30% is Pakistan's, 40% is India's, and 20% is China's. So, do you think that China should actually be in this conflict? Because mostly this conflict was caused by as you said, the religious conflict between Muslim and Hindu, and how an Indian ruler ruled Kashmir, but the people of Kashmir were actually majority of them were Muslims, so it started like that. But do you think China should be in this conflict?
I don't think that probably would be a good idea, because generally the Chinese don't have a very good track record with mediating in the minority areas. I mean, you look at the history of Tibet, and then of course with the Uyghurs right now, the Muslim minority in eastern China, who are also very poorly treated. And then there's the whole issue of Taiwan. So generally the Chinese, when they become involved, Chinese Communist Party in particular, it adds more fuel to the fire, and the problem seems to become more aggravated than solved. I think this would be an issue. Again, I don't have enough background on the history of this issue, but it would really be an issue for the United Nations to be mediating in, the Blue Helmets or whatever, some kind of peacekeeping force that can keep these two parties separate from each other. Of course, the way it is right now is ridiculous. Like every day, they just end up lobbing artillery shells at each other, and people just keep dying. I don't even know how many people have died over the years, but it must be quite enormous. But that's definitely not the solution. So first, it should be calmed down, this conflict, and then people sit, there should be some kind of a keeping force, and then somehow people should have a meeting together, some kind of conference, and discuss how can we find some kind of compromise solution. So every side is going to have to give in a little bit. It cannot just be what Dokdo is tiny, right? You cannot divide Dokdo between Korea and Japan. That's ridiculous. But this is a fairly large area where you can say, well, maybe you could have the more predominantly Muslim part, and you could have the predominantly more Hindu part, but that would have to be mediated through some kind of a wise council, probably the United Nations.
So this is my last question. Many people, for the resolution for this conflict, believe that it should be like, one country should be dominant, or the Kashmir region itself has to be ruled by some kind of country. But there is experts say there are one possibility where actually the region itself can be independent of no country influencing it and become autonomous itself. What do you think about it?
That's possible, of course. I think there are two issues with that. One is that in general, the tendency in the world is more towards greater unity, unification. You can see that in Europe. You have the independent European countries, and now they're joined into a European Union. On the other hand, there are countries, even in Europe, that have like a minority territory, like the Basque area in Spain, or some other territories where, or the Catalans around Barcelona. They say we want independence from Spain because we have our own historical heritage and our own cultural customs, so we should be separated from Spain. Of course, the Spanish government resists that because they say, no, we need to work together as a political, economic entity because it will benefit everybody. So there's something to say for it and against it. In case of Kashmir also, you could say, no, it's not a good idea because this country is a completely tiny little landlocked area. They cannot really take care of themselves independently and economically and so forth. It's much more beneficial for them to be part of a larger country because economically and politically they would benefit from that. The other question is also, if they would become independent and there would be a Kashmir country, would it be guaranteed that they could solve their problems then? Because then you still are going to have the issue of a Muslim community and a Hindu community, and then, as you mentioned, the Chinese community. Or would that lead then to some kind of internal civil war, right? That's a question. So I don't know that if that's the solution or not. Maybe, but it's hard. That would have to really be studied, and I think you would have to give some kind of you have to do some kind of a national survey among the population themselves, the people themselves, what they would want themselves also. That would, of course, would be very important.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I prepared, and thank you for
Okay, my pleasure.